Hello, everyone. My name is Keith Perrin. I am the CEO of Court Square Group, and this is the Driving the Business of Science podcast. And today we have a special guest, Mitchell Bear, the managing partner of Arlen Consulting. But before I get to Mitchell, let's talk a little bit about what Court Square is all about and what this podcast is all about. So, Court Square is a managed service firm. We manage infrastructure for life science companies. We also have a content repository called RegDocs 365, which hosts any type of clinical and regulatory content, as well as we're doing a bunch of AI tools now within that document repository. From that experience, I've been involved with lots of customers across the board, whether they be consulting firms, they be sponsor companies, CROs, CDMOs, global laboratories across the board, anything in a highly regulated space. With that, I meet a lot of very interesting people across the board. And I think it's really interesting that, people think about drug development, they think about the life science vertical in general, and they think about scientists in a lab all the time. There's so many other people that we have to deal with in this field. And I think that Mitchell is a great example of one of those people. And I thought he'd be a great person to have on this podcast. Mitchell, I'll turn it over to you. You can give yourself a little bit of a pat on the back and tell us a little bit about yourself. And then let's get into a couple questions about your background.
Sure. Thanks, Keith. Appreciate it. Yeah, I've been in this industry since 2002, so 24 plus years. I came to a little startup out of New York City with 11 other people. So it was the 12th hire at a company called Medidata Solutions, which of course everyone knows today. But back in 2002, when the 12 of us were in this awful little office, nobody knew us. So that was my indoctrination, working with the founders there. And it was a great 14-year run for me. I learned so much about the industry. But the thing that I particularly focused on after early on, where I kind of ran marketing and sales and HR, which is astonishing that ever happened. And pretty much any function that the founders wanted me to do, I would do. And I love those guys, and I love the mission, and I believed they were on the right path and super brilliant. And a couple of years in, I approached them about starting a CRO partner program. At that time, Medidata was selling directly to sponsors. Not a lot. We were a little company growing. But we knew we had a better mousetrap, we used to say. We really knew that the EDC was terrific. But you got to sell direct and indirect in most industries. And I broached this idea about, why don't we create a partner program? There was a lot of skepticism, but ultimately I won that argument. And we created in 2005 a program called Aspire to Win, which was application service provider, was the Aspire part. It's a hot topic back then in the early 2000s. And basically, we had to enable CROs to leverage Rave, our product. And it was a little scary. So we created certifications and accreditations and guardrails, so that if we did teach a third party how to do that, to build a Rave study, we could sleep at night. So that program was great, and it really helped Medidata eventually go public in 2009. We had about 16, 17 CRO partners when we went public. And it was driving a disproportionate share of the early business, while we got our enterprise act together and really learned how to scale and do what we did. But it was a real good feeder for the direct reps. We didn't have to hire hundreds of reps. We were able to really leverage the partners, and by enabling them, and that was what was unique about it, we were actually teaching them how to leverage our software for a competitive advantage. And once you sign up, the first Icon was the first partner on Valentine's Day 2005, and then so on and so on. And I think I signed 12 of the first 16 over a 5-year period, and we grew the business. And when I left in 2016, it was a real success and a big part of how we went public. So that's
That's
my
fantastic.
early story.
That's fantastic. You know, it's interesting. You know, as you were saying a couple of things there, I want to make sure that I pointed out. So EDC, electronic data capture. Um, People don't realize that up until less than 20 years ago, we were capturing everything on paper when it came to drug development. It came to dealing with patients out in the field. And even today, we take EDC based systems, and in this industry, you know, you'll see that a lot of people print out the things and scan them back in because they want to do wet signatures on them. So we actually take some of the fidelity out of the actual data that would have been captured pretty well in a normal EDC system. Rave is, to your point, one of the de facto standards out there. Everybody's using it. It's all over the place. But the reality is, the industry still, as a whole, um, finds a way to somehow take the distinction out of the data that we're gathering and make it more difficult to deal with. And we deal with it all the time on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So I love your background. I love that you're starting out so early like that with these companies. Tell me about some of the interaction with those early CROs when you were first starting to do some work.
Sure. And to your point, in 2002, 92% of trials were paper. So it's hard for the current group of business developers in this industry to understand that. But yeah, it was only 8% EDC, and we were really competing against paper, not really against one another all that much. The early challenge really, and Icon was a fantastic beta partner, as we called it, because I used to say to them, sometimes we'll be 5 minutes ahead of you, and sometimes we'll be 5 minutes behind you, but we're in this together. You're going to help us craft a way to enable a third party, a CRO, to really be competitive with this software and win more business and remain stickier in your clients. And, there was at the time Phase Forward was the dominant EDC company. Everyone knew them. They weren't as partner friendly as we were. So, but they created the demand, and they really helped in that people could see the promise of EDC, but frankly, they like working with us more. And it was really all about making sure that the enablement, that we could really offload and train and get these folks up and running in a reasonable period of time, which it actually took quite a while, but they could sense the commitment. They knew we were in this for the long run and that we would do anything to make them successful, and that we had integrity, that if they were asking us to bid a study, we would. And if a competitor asked us to bid a study that wasn't a partner or ultimately became, didn't matter. We put blinders on. We'd quote the studies as we saw them. We wouldn't talk. I used to always insist, however, that we get back to all the CROs asking for an RFP, a bid, a budget, and just let them know how many. How many are you up against? Because that's valuable, but never a name, never talk about. So you really had to be a good partner, put your heart and soul into your formal partners, aspire to win partners, but talk to every CRO and help every CRO and offer to go to a bid defense, which they would never let you do back in that day anyway, other than maybe your partners.
Isn't it funny, some of us that have been in this industry for a long time, and when we talk about the life science industry, I'm talking biotech, med device. Right now, there's gene therapy companies. There's a whole bunch of different ones out there. But back in those days, it was probably primarily small molecule, big pharma companies. That's the push of biotech hasn't really gotten out there yet. But the reality is, that big pharma was kind of driving everything for what was going on there, and these CROs were kind of a boon to them because they were able to do more trials, get more things out there. They didn't want to do all the studies. They wanted somebody else dealing with it, particularly when they're dealing with multiple languages across different countries that they're dealing with. So working with those CROs, the biggest problem that I see from the perspective of just the CROs is that today it seems like those CROs are buying up all these small companies that are out there so they can incorporate their tools and make it their own, so that they all have their own kind of set of tools that they're dealing with, because they're doing that and they can just upcharge for them and do more with those kind of things as just another revenue stream. I don't see as much of the maybe I'm being a little harsh, but for the bigger ones maybe, but for the smaller ones, I think that that are either focused on a certain therapeutic area, or their lead person of running the CRO, has an affinity for, one type of product. I think that they're trying to be way too much to too many people sometimes, and it just seems like um, they want to be all encompassing. They want to grab everything out there, and sometimes when you're trying to figure out in this industry, how do we get more people to get more drugs out to market, that sometimes it takes that smaller approach and those smaller company approaches. How about the small CROs? Did you guys work a lot with any of the small CROs out there? Or
Yeah,
how did
so
that work?
uh, we were really after the big fish to get started. I signed Icon. My second one was actually PharmaLink, which was a small, became Novella, which then IQVIA bought. They were small, but they were unique because they had only run 33 trials, I think, when I met them, all electronic. So think about that. In an industry
Yeah,
that was 92% paper, that's a CRO that was E only, never ran a paper trial. They were leveraging Phase Forward's technology. And part of the reason I brought them on board was to show the world there was another one. And everyone was into that. Plus, we were still mastering how to train Icon. And we wanted to make sure we didn't screw that up so that
right.
we could roll it out repeatable and that each CRO would get, our full attention, that we could brand around their brand. So, that whole question of, well, if we help you, I kind of asked that, if we're going to help you, are you going to give this to everybody else? And the answer was yes, but we're going to give it to them and wrap it into their process and what they do and how they go to market. So we're neutral. We just want everyone to compete with the best tool, and we think we have it. And we're going to really invest time in doing that for you. So after PharmaLink, it was the big guys that are gone, Kendall and some of these names that have disappeared, that all got merged, in the 7, 8, 9. So yeah, my 12 were all big except PharmaLink. Then after I left and Medidata really took off, after I left in 16, and we were about uh, I was told we had about 1,500 sponsors and about 1,000 came through Aspire to Win. They've now, just blown the cover off of it. They probably have 300 CRO partners at this point. So all the small ones. I will tell you, in working with other technology companies, I built 3 other partner programs subsequently to leaving in 2016. And we love the biotechs. These partner programs thrive on the biotechs. But we'll never forget the big sponsors either. So
It's probably because there's so many biotechs that come and go that you keep thriving on some of the same people over and
that
over because they go to
oh,
so
it's a
many
great
different
point.
companies.
You do bump into a lot of the same ones, but it's really interesting how the big CROs run a certain way, and you have to learn that and respect that, work with that, be patient. And the small ones run in a different way. You still need patience, but it's just a different. The bottom line is, if your technology is good and it can make a CRO more competitive, um, you got to be persistent and get them to understand the value prop. And what I've seen happen is, in the early days, the big guys competed against the big guys, the little guys against the little guys. That's still kind of true, but there's been a lot of crossover because these niche CROs, boutique CROs, phenomenal in oncology or, terrific in CNS, they will go up against the CNS or oncology unit of a top 10, and their cost structures are different. They can be very competitive if you give them the tools. And Arlen Consulting Group, what I do is I look for technology solutions that I believe can make a CRO more competitive and therefore compete better, stay sticky with your client. And so really, I'm talking to all CROs of all sizes all the time.
No, that's pretty cool. Part of what I think about a lot of times is, when I go to a lot of shows, people think that, I'm a technology guy, so I go to all these IT shows all the time. I would much rather go to the industry shows and talk to clinical and regulatory people and find out what's driving them, because then I can think about, from a technology perspective, how can I help to solve that problem for them?
That's right.
Because they're not technology people. They're looking for things. I can look outside the industry and find things that I think we can adapt to this industry and do things with, where other people may not think that way. Um, I know that I deal a lot with some of those companies, and you deal with a lot of sponsor companies. You deal with they talk about, well, we'll bring in functional service providers to do this or functional providers to do that, best of breed across the board, and start to put that together a mishmash of companies that are there. I'm seeing a lot of times now where you get a lot of these big pharma companies or larger biotechs that they're cleave off an entire division, and all of a sudden you get all these different consultants running around trying to do things. It gives them a chance to start a consulting firm, practice, whatever. I've been trying to appeal to a number of those companies, actually individuals, to work together and do some work with some of these smaller companies that just can't afford some of the big guys. Because it's incredible how many great ideas die on the vine because they just don't get the funding. They don't get that early push, or they do get some funding, but they spend so much money on some of the tools just to get to the next phase that they just run out of runway. The ultimate goal is to get that to the patient. And if we can help in any small way to do that, that's kind of what the push that we try to do from that perspective. So, I think that when you look at that, and I think that, in your case with Rave and that, it helped so much to speed up clinical trials, to do that kind of work and to get that out there. Even with Phase Forward blazing the trail for you, I'm sure that you learned some lessons by doing that thing with PharmaLinks and being able to do that and bringing those trials. Some of the lessons they learned probably helped you guys as well. Were there things that you thought about from that perspective that when you started to work with different sponsors, or different CROs, did you get some good lessons that came back to you guys?
Oh yeah, yeah, and we were always very receptive, and I think that was the key. Was we wanted to learn. We weren't afraid to try new things, but we were very diligent about getting the first one right, and that's a theme that I've done with all my partnerships. So it's really bad if you mess up the founding partner. So you better make sure that whatever technology you're representing, well, first of all, if it can't create a competitive advantage for a CRO, or it's not yet being sold or to a sponsor, then there's nothing really to talk about. So I have companies come to me with great technology, but they're not selling direct yet. So how can I get a CRO to want to learn about it when
That's a real good point.
right? And so I probably talk to 10 companies a month, or every 6 weeks, and I keep my client list low. I only carry like 2, 3, 4 clients. I had 5 for a brief period. I don't, because I'm being very selective about the stuff that I believe the CROs it'll resonate with them, because they have their procurement people and their all what they go through to bring on. And some of the big guys are trying to downsize they've got so many vendors. And so, there's a lot of noise. So if you're going to, so I'm always looking for technologies. I have a client now, Slope Clinical, has an amazing biospecimen platform. It's digitizing that whole journey of a biospecimen, from the point, getting rid of the paper manuals, but from the point of the very first visit. So the schedule of assessments is programmed in. All the kits are delivered on demand, not just bulk supply. So we're driving kit waste down tremendously. We're integrating with Rave or the EDC right up front. So we're driving queries down to record lows. I've never seen anything like it. That's something that the sponsors like, and I can help them with, because I can take that message to the CROs and say, no, we can almost pay. In fact, sometimes we do pay for ourselves just in kit waste and query reduction. So why would you not want to streamline? And it serves up existing process every day. What the sites do, it just makes our lives easier. And the couriers, the sites, the labs, it's coordinating all that in a platform. To me, and with 70% of the biospecimens or clinical trials having some activity in biospecimen, cracking the code on that, forgetting R3, which does add more tailwind to it, but just being able to do what that platform can do, it's astonishing to me. It's fantastic. And those are the kind of technologies I'm looking to represent with my CROs, and they're listening because It makes sense to them. They see the value. They see they can differentiate. And the CROs are blind a lot. Sponsors holding them accountable. They don't know what's happening with these labs and these specimens at the sites. So the
Yeah.
sites are happy, the CROs, we're shining a light on the whole journey, soup to nuts, and it's really exciting.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I just got involved with a client over the last couple of years that's in the clinical supply chain. And I didn't realize how much drug product was lost to waste because of, being on a tarmac too long and it's temperature controlled and
Yeah.
all of a sudden you can't guarantee temperature and all of a sudden, it's those kind of things that people don't think about. And when you see those, you're like, oh wow, yeah, that makes sense. Or that samples get put into a guy's car and it's real different if they're in the trunk of a car in Minnesota versus the trunk of a car in South Florida.
Yeah,
How
no.
quickly they'll go. And it's like that kind of stuff you don't think about. But
And if you're a
yeah,
site, if you're a site, you're a coordinator in a site. You've got so much to do, and having to fill out these airway bills manually as mistakes come in. Remember what needs to be refrigerated, what doesn't. This platform just serves that up for you, so they know. And yeah, a lot of these complex studies have a central lab and 5 or 6 specialty labs. So now you've got stuff going in a million different directions. And that has traditionally been tracked on Excel spreadsheets. It's insane. I never knew it till I brought. So my clients and the people I don't bring on as clients are my new teachers. I'm learning so much about this industry that I didn't know in my early days at Medidata. I was focused on get the next CRO on board, let's train them, let's make them be successful. But now I'm hearing everyone's story and all these technologies, they are pretty amazing. I'm choosing to, work with a subset that I think can help a CRO.
I think that's a great segment that just to pull on that string a little bit more because I was going to ask you, you must really see a lot of different things that push the boundaries of what your knowledge is for the industry in general and how you can bring things. How when you select those 4 or 5 that you want to work with, what are the big things that kind of jump out to you the most when you're trying to represent somebody, or you think you've got a winner that's it's sort of like the VCs going out there and finding somebody, right? You got to
Yep.
find somebody. You look at a lot of things before you find those couple of tidbits that really make sense.
Yeah. So the first thing I look at is, are you selling direct? And we touched on that. If you're not selling direct, I can't get a CRO excited about you. So there's got to be demand. So if they're selling direct, then the question becomes, um, are you solving a problem that is causing pain to a CRO? If the answer is yes, then we keep going. And I have a checklist that I work through, which includes things like, could a third party build your software? Because if they can, that's another allure. I'm a big one on core competencies. Tech companies should focus on tech,
Yeah.
and service companies should focus on service. And all of us growing up as tech companies do both to just for self-preservation. We can't create this thing and deploy it uh, with somebody else until we really feel good about that. Hence, formal partner programs enablement based. So, but if you can't build a third-party tool, that's okay. That just changes the way we would partner with CROs. CROs are always looking for new services to do. They have lots of people. They don't want to be laying off people. The industry is the way it is. There's always layoffs. But if we can, if you don't have to do that because we're redeploying some of your folks around some new technology that's helping you win business, now you're sort of bringing together the commercial side with the scientists and the SMEs, that understand the science so well, that love the software we're bringing because they see the value add. So there's those are the high level things.
When I go to shows these days and I listen to some of the ClinOps people talk about dealing with clinical sites, and they talk about how sometimes the clinical sites have so many different types of technologies they have to absorb at the clinical sites.
Yeah.
How do you identify a technology that you may want to bring to a CRO to get into those clinical sites that isn't going to add to their burden that they're already out there? Is there some technique that you think about when you're
Well,
looking at those tools?
yeah, it's interesting. WCG has put out some data that's astonishing to your point about how much burden it adds to the sites. And everyone talks about lessening burden at the sites, but I don't really believe people care that much, to be honest with you. And it's a shame because if you've been to these sites, what these folks do is incredible. So yeah, I'm looking for software that integrates easily and quickly, where the APIs work and we can bring together multiple technologies so that ideally bringing on the new tech reduces what the site people actually have to do. So example, I'll go back to that example I gave you before. In the slope case, if these sites are monitoring studies with 40, 50% query rates, and because slope integrates with the EDC, with the IRT, with the, we eliminate many other things that those coordinators have to do. And when you drive queries down to 4%, 2% in one study, 8%, single digit, you are completely freeing up lots of time at the site. That particular company has like 2,500 sites that use them for their own inventory management, apart from the biospecimen stuff. So we know the sites like to use it. And to me, making the sites happy is definitely the trend we're on, but really not just saying it like we've been doing for the last 15 years, actually delivering on that to make those sites more productive. Let the technology do the heavy lifting and eliminate double data entry and eliminate a lot of this stuff that still goes on that is just makes no sense to me.
Well, that kind of alludes to that kind of falls right in line with what I was talking about earlier, where sometimes the sites are so burdened they take the easiest way out of doing things, and sometimes that easy way out causes more problems on the end. So if you can eliminate those that need to do manual labor and all that stuff, it's just going to make them that much more efficient. And you want them dealing with the patients. Typically we're trying to solve really tough problems out there, and patients coming in on clinical trials, the last thing they want to do is be sitting there extra time because somebody's trying to play around with some new piece of software or a new technical tool that they're working with, right? So
Yeah.
they just want it to work, and they want to be in and out and feel like they're going to get something out of it in the long run.
Yeah, another thing I look for, and to your point, you just made me think of it, is these technologies have to, work on a web browser, whether it's a phone, a tablet, a computer. I mean, I see companies competing with Slope even that only work on a phone. Well, that's just that's not going to work. They don't so the integration's important. Working on any device is really important because people at sites like to work in different ways. So you've got to meet them where they work.
Well,
It's
and I
another.
think the less you force them to use another piece of hardware or something else they got to plug in or something else that they've got to train on, you know, they're always going to train on it. So I can't say that, but if they're training on a device that they're already familiar with, it's much easier to deal with it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, interesting. So, as we're coming up toward the end here, one of the things I'd like to just kind of talk a little bit more with you about is as you're dealing with new companies that you're looking at, where do you see the industry going over the next couple of years? There's a big push in AI, big push in some of those kind of tools. Where do you see what you're doing and where Arlen Consulting's going in the next, 2 to 3 years for some of the companies you're looking at?
Well, Arlen Consulting is going to go where is going to follow where the industry goes. If there were no CROs in the world, I'd have to do something else for a living. So, I mentioned when I got in, it was 50-50. In 2002, every one trial went direct, one went indirect. Today it's 70-30, 80-20 CRO. So, yes, the CROs are going to have to figure out AI. I had a great AI client early on in my consultancy, and we scared the hell out of about 20 CROs. They didn't know what to do with this. Now, we got in early, and I think now it's a little easier because they've sorted it all out. But I think they were nervous and worried. And so, yeah, CRO's got to figure out how they're going to leverage AI, no question. And that will work. I think that's working its way out at pharma as well, and that is just going to continue to happen. But I think one of the interesting things, and I remember in 2002, Glenn DeVries, may he rest in peace, said to me, there won't be any EDC in 25 years. I'll always remember him telling me that. So here we are, coming up on 25 years. And there is EDC, but this is where I'm going with this is he wasn't that far off because you see EHR to EDC the last 5-8 years coming on strong. I feel like it's EHR to something and it's not EHR to EDC. So we'll see. I think it's more of a clinical data repository. It's some other kind of an endpoint from the EHR, but I think how that all shakes out ultimately is really going to influence the next 10 years. And I
I
think
think it's
Glenn's
probably going to
words
be
will be
something.
right.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be something about AI taking a pull out of EHR without having you having manually do that kind of stuff, and
Yep.
then having just the
And
somebody
that's
adjudicate
happening
it.
today. It's
Yeah,
happening today, but where it's such lightning fast speed in the evolution of AI, I think, 2 years from now it'll be much different than what you and I are talking about. In
well, it's
5 years,
it's
certainly.
funny you say that. I was just on a call earlier today with a DIA, Drug Information Association group, talking about AI, and they're talking about RIM, regulatory information management, talking about where the RIM is. And actually, a lot of people in the group were talking about how clinical operations has actually embraced AI way more this now
Yeah.
than where the regulators are and the regulatory people are. But they say that by 2027, 28, they think there's going to be more in the regulatory space jumping on that. What the reality is, we're actually doing some projects right now in the regulatory space as well as the clinical space. So I think you're right on. I think that clinical dealing with patient data and pulling patient data and doing something with it as part of a trial is already happening, and it's going to continue to happen and just evolve over time. So to the point where, yeah, EDC is going to be fundamentally different than what it is today. The
Yeah.
concept of having to type in or put in, patient data into a record is going to be
Yeah.
kind of by the wayside.
Yeah. And you're going to see, I think, also the blending of healthcare and research so that it's just all one.
Let's
And
only hope. That would be a huge benefit to everybody if we could actually see that. There's people still too afraid of patient data getting used inappropriately and things like that. But let's hope we can get past that, because I think if we can ever see that melding of healthcare and research come together in a much more thoughtful way, I think it would help drive um, so many more amazing things happening in the industry.
yeah, no,
But,
and there's plenty of companies working on it, but it'll take more time. But I think we'll get there. I think that's a huge part of the next decade.
well, Mitch, I want to thank you very much for your time today. I thought it's been a fantastic conversation. Hopefully, our audience will feel the same. Um, Thank you very much, and thanks to the audience out there. You have a
Thank
great day.
you.
Want to get
Thanks
one
so much.
last word for Arlen Consulting or for any of the companies you're representing right now?
No, other than please DM me, reach out to me if you've got a technology, if you feel that you want to be socialized with CROs, you can help CROs. I'll help you figure that out. Again, I'm pretty particular because I want one solution to every problem. But guess what? There's probably 50 problems. I named it Arlen Consulting Group so that when I'm ready, I can go out and bring others in. To your point earlier, but I can't know everything and I don't. I'm a business developer, I'm a networker. I've gotten kind of sciencey in my old age, but I'm never going to be somebody that can do everything. I know so many great people in this industry that are consulting because they have to, not they want to. I don't want to be a W-2 ever again. Um, but I know some brilliant folks, cross-functional, and if I have too much demand because I find so many technologies that can help CROs, I'll make sure I make the group a reality and bring in some folks to help scale. So I've got no limits really what I can do because I feel I know a lot of great people that have really mentored me, been my customers, taught me things, and having a great time in my old age.
That's great. And you'll notice we have group in our name. So I agree with you. The same thing. I love having a group of people to solve more problems that way. And I know that we work with a lot of CROs, so I'm definitely going to be talking to you as well.
Oh,
Thanks, Mitch.
awesome.
Have a great day.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.